it won't happen that AI will take music from humans, because music is defined and judged by humans, between humans. I have a very positive outlook into the future in terms of that there will be even a larger appreciation for music than there currently is.
Welcome back to the Music 2.0 podcast. Now, one of the big parts and the big benefits of this podcast is going to be getting experts on as guests. And one of our first experts here on the podcast is Max Hilsdorf. Now, Max and I have had a couple of conversations previously to having this interview. And the reason why Max really popped up on my radar is because as I was doing my deep dive into understanding where we are with this AI technology, like how good are these models, how quickly are they evolving and advancing, and how do we sort of, for those of us that are non-technical people, non-coders, how do we wrap our heads around this technology? Because I think it's a really important thing to first understand the basics of it, get some common terminology understood so that as it kind of, rears its head up into the public domain, we music creators and producers can have a full understanding and appreciation for the power of this technology. But more importantly, we need to make some sense out of it. What do we do with it? How do we use it to empower us? How much of it is going to be a potential threat for our current way of life and how we make our money with our music? And Max is one of these very, very gifted individuals who has he has history and roots in music. He's a musician himself, but he's also a data science consultant. And I'm definitely going to be picking his brain in terms of what exactly that means and what he does on a day-to-day basis. But he's also an AI educator. He's an AI music enthusiast. Right now, he works at a company called StatWorks. He's in Germany, and he basically is a data science consultant. He's also an educator. He helps people like you and I, a part of this conversation, get educated in this space. He also previously worked with a company called Cyanite, which is essentially a company working with AI keywords and metadata tagging to help us music creators get our music discovered more quickly by music supervisors and production music libraries and TV film clients. So there's basically two sides of this world developing, where you have AI generated music, but you also have people that are helping human creators get their music into the hands of people that can get them placements. So I think that's a really, really awesome thing. And I'm definitely going to try to get the founders of Cyanite onto my podcast for future episodes. So with that out of the way, Max, thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you for joining us for Music 2.0. Why don't you give us a quick background on your history with music and AI and how these two passions of yours sort of merged into what you're doing today with StatWorks.
Yeah, sure. So hi, Jesse. Hi, everyone. Very glad to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, so in my life, it's actually been like music and AI have been two main pillars of my life over the last years. But again, of course, when I was like 5 or 6 years old, I wasn't interested in data science. So it was really music back then. And so I was just singing when I was a child. I was like memorizing my singing books, and then at some point picked up the guitar, started playing acoustic guitar, then electric guitar, and all like the general path, I guess, for lots of people. And then, but I really also got interested in composition and like music theory and that nerdy stuff. So when I actually finished school and went to university, I started studying musicology, and I went like really deep into music theory, but also music psychology, and then the empirical research part of music. And that's kind of actually where I got to that whole numbers thing, because I was really interested in music psychology research. And it's really hard to do music psychology research without some statistics and kind of, statistics software, a little bit of math. And I didn't expect this, actually. I was kind of trying to learn this to get competent in this field, but it really sparked my interest for math and data that I had never developed before, not in school, not anywhere else. And so I really kind of got more interested in the data part of music and this intersection of music and data science and AI. And I started like programming and diving deep into AI systems and teaching myself all the stuff I could possibly find. And so when I actually finished my musicology degree, I switched to a bachelor's in data science as well. So I actually didn't do a master's degree and stayed on the music path, but I switched to data science and kind of did these 2 bachelor's degrees on the side. So I'm kind of like really rooted in both disciplines. And so during my studies, I actually started working for a yeah, German company called Cyanide. You already mentioned them, and there I was developing music tagging systems, so mood recommendation, instrument recommendation, so this stuff. And this is of course really, really, really fun to do. And that was pretty much the time also where I started writing educational articles on Medium. At first about programming, and then later on, as my recent articles have mostly been about the intersection also of data science and music. So I'm typically somewhere between really technical posts that are kind of accessible to most people with experience in AI, then also posts that are really accessible to everyone who's at least interested in kind of learning more about this topic. So that's kind of the range I'm trying to fill up with this Medium account. Yes, and currently, of course, after I finished university, I actually went into a non-music field. So I'm currently a data science consultant, and in my case, this really means preparing and holding corporate workshops, mainly corporate workshops in the domains of programming and data science, cloud, AI, so all that sort of stuff. And it's really these three pillars like music. I'm also kind of playing in a blues rock band and bass and singing and all that stuff. So like I am a musician and I'm also a data scientist and I'm also an educator. So it seems like I can't get rid of either of these three pillars because it'll make me unhappy. So I'm kind of always switching between these three and kind of finding my golden spot, I guess.
Makes perfect sense. And I think the fact that you have all these different backgrounds, especially the music and the data science together, is what makes you very, very valuable, especially in this moment in time of history where I feel that there's a big breakdown in communication between producers and music creators and the AI experts and all these companies and tech specialists that are sort of working on this technology. This has been a big source of a lot of anxiety for a lot of music creators and producers, myself included, of course. And before we get into sort of the specifics of the AI world, I really kind of want to start off with maybe a philosophical question for you. And it's not really a right or wrong kind of question, but I'm just curious on your particular point of view on this. Why are we doing this, right? Why are human beings pushing and prodding and experimenting with our technology to try to create automatically generated music or, you know, any form of that technology? Because you see what's happening with DALL-E and Midjourney, where we're essentially synthesizing every picture and piece of art that's ever existed, and we're pushing our technology to see, can we be creative and expressive with this technology? And of course, there are artists and many people out there that are very unhappy about that. Other people are also very excited and really intrigued by what we can do. I always find it's just kind of one of these things where human beings are sort of addicted to this. Like, it's almost like we are compelled to just push ourselves as far as we could possibly go with our technology. What's your take on this? Like, why are human beings doing this? Why are we even trying to do this AI stuff?
Oh yeah, I think that's interesting because like until recently, I think, or even currently, it's really not everyone and people kind of doing this, but it's actually more data scientists doing this, right? So it's really a small group of people who's interested in this stuff. And even within data science, of course, audio is a small branch, and then music is like the smaller audio branch as opposed to speech and stuff. So it's really a very nerdy elite group, you could say, of people who are actually building these kind of products. So this is really interesting to know because it hasn't really gotten around to most people why we're actually doing this. So there's of course I guess methodological fascination for this, because as a data scientist, it's just fun to not only work with tables and like Excel sheet data sets and stuff, but like dealing with these cool data types like audio and images and speech that's like so complex and rich and social. And it's like fascinating just to kind of try and make this stuff work. And it's also been a pain point in data science for a long time, because music kind of always seems to be a little bit more complex than text or image, and much more complex than like table kind of data. So it's really a fascination of trying to getting this stuff work and trying to generate music that kind of sounds like human music. So that's, from a technical perspective, really fascinating. And then the other part, and I guess this is the part we could argue about, is there a more general use for this technology for the people, not just for the data scientists and the research community? And I tend to think yes. Of course, just having these kinds of tools, it's just great to have because there are applications for this. So currently, speaking of elite groups who are developing machine learning algorithms, musicians are a pretty elite group, especially those who can produce high quality music. They have the equipment, they have the, I guess, natural born creativity for this, but they also have kind of the resources to buy the equipment. They have the education. They maybe have the resources to pursue a music education instead of something that just, I guess, pays better or something. So it's like really something that people who have the opportunity and the passion do. But there's a huge threshold to people without musical training to producing high quality music. So this is a technology that can actually like democratize this whole music creation process. And of course, that is scary to musicians, and it should be, because it's really disruptive. So things are about to change in one way or another. But I really do think that is something that's valuable for the people, just democratizing music creation, letting everyone unfold their creative expressiveness through music, and like making music that social thing that everyone can kind of interact with and do with each other and have fun with. And I think that's definitely where we're heading in the future. And there are business use cases for this, which of course we'll also discuss. But I think the main 2 points are it's just fascinating to do. So data scientists do it. And also, I think there are some cool things happening in society if everyone is able to use these tools to generate and share and discuss music with each other.
I love how you put that. And it's definitely a point of conversation in our community right now, which is we music producers feel a sense of our identities being threatened. And exactly for what you just pointed out is that for the longest time, creating music took a lot of work, a lot of effort, definitely some natural talent, and like you said, some access to some tools. Now those tools have become much more accessible because of technology. But this raises that, or I guess lowers that barrier of entry to the floor, where essentially with a free app, a free website, you're going to be able to create something that's pretty decent, and you can have zero, musical knowledge or training or skills to be able to do that. And that certainly makes us traditional music creators wondering, where are we then? What makes us special or unique? And I think all human beings in the face of AI, in our existential quiet part of our brains, are having this conversation of, if this thing can do what I do way better, way faster, way cheaper than I can do it, what makes me special anymore? And this is going to be one of these tough conversations we have to have with each other and also internally. We won't get into that big subject right now, but I think you really brought up some great points there, especially about the elite group of musicians and producers. That's something I'd actually even never pieced together. So thanks for sharing that.
I also think this is already happening. So like the democratization of music before AI was coming about. So in the last 10 or 20 years, there was so much stuff happening with other technologies, and there's lots of tools. I could probably find a website very quickly where I can just go to without creating an account and just compose music with like drag and drop tools or something, and then loop it, and then it's really cool, and I can rap over it or something. So I can really do this kind of stuff already. But it's with these new tools, it seems like it could be the case that the sky will become the limit, instead of just like the drag drop tools. They're still limited, and it's still a big advantage that musicians have over non-musicians. And it may be that this could change. So I just wanted to add this aspect as well. It is happening. It's kind of just maybe taking a pace now.
Very much so, right. And that's a very good point. It was one of the points that I made in one of my previous videos on my YouTube channel, which was that, we're here, I'm sitting here as the beneficiary of technology exponentially increasing, right? You had the internet, you had hardware and software, and then you also had cable TV. All of these forms of technology provided an entire avenue of income called sync licensing, right? And none of that was really possible until all of these technological developments all merged and cohesively worked together. So we're sitting here basically on the throne of this technology, and we're doing great and we're excited. It's not easy to make income, but you can, it's possible. And so that's where I keep trying to remind myself and all of my followers and subscribers of that, is that we need to not be the one thinking like, well, no, too much change is not good. Well, it's like, well, change is what allowed us to get to where we are right now. And I think where we are right now is kind of cool. It's kind of a cool point. It's not easy, not easy to make income with your music, but more access, more possibilities, more potential for you to do that. And so I also believe, probably like you, that AI will just continue that trend. It won't be easy, but there will be more and more plentiful opportunities to basically go pursue. And that's what we want to really do on this podcast, is keep our eyes open for those new opportunities. So let's jump into where we are right now. Where are we today in terms of how good are these AI models? What's the best you've seen out there? Are there any models out there that are basically getting scary good in terms of they're almost on par with what a human being can produce? You keep your finger close on this stuff, and you really are looking at this. What are you seeing out there right now?
Yeah. So for me, I think we're not there yet. So maybe that's the first thing to say. I would also be interested in your opinion because, of course, I can list you kind of some tools that are new and that are competent at creating music relatively to other tools. But like judging the quality of the output, of course, that's very, very subjective. And one person will be like, so I showed this music LM model that I'll talk about in a second also. It's so one really new model that I'm really fascinated by. I showed this to another musician and they were like absolutely not impressed. And they were like, wow, those violins, they sound absolutely stupid. And I was like, so I'm not a violin player. So of course I noticed there's a difference, but like I didn't get kind of appalled by this, but they were like really, and I can't listen to this. So it's very subjective, I guess. And I think it's really hard to say like, where are we now? Because again, music is subjective. So are we on par with humans? I don't think so, but where are we? Kind of, that's hard to tell. I think one thing that seems certain to me is that we are in this upwards exponential curve when it comes to music generative technology. And we've been in this upwards exponential curve for a while. And I guess it's gotten to the public really with ChatGPT in the text domain. So this was really the difference between ChatGPT from November 22 and GPT-3 from 2020 somewhere. It's not a large technological difference. So just from a technical standpoint, but it's really like people were made aware of the power these tools have. And it was presented in a way that's very usable and user-friendly. So everyone is pretty much kind of aware now that we are in this upwards trend, and everyone is like worrying what's going to happen next, right? And GPT-4 came a few months after ChatGPT, and what does this thing do again? And I guess it's the same with music, but I think, and we can also explore the reasons for that in this discussion, is music is kind of on the same curve, but it's a few years maybe or months behind. So I think we are moving in this exponential curve, but maybe we are where we were with text in 2020, maybe as we were in 2021. I think there seems to me to be a delay in quality of about, not sure, maybe a little bit more than a year, maybe 2 years. So kind of there seems to be a delay in this. And I think we are heading towards having AI that produces quality very similar to the quality that professional musicians can perform. So currently, I would say the most competent model that I'm aware of is called Music LM, so Music Language Model. And this is a really interesting tool because it's similar to these image creation tools that many people know, where you put in a text and then you get an audio output. And it's not symbolic music, so it's not MIDI output, and it's not like a sheet or something as an output. It's actual raw audio output. And this is a major thing in the research because there are lots of complexities to music, again, that we can explore later. But Music LM was really a technical breakthrough. And I also think in terms of quality, like the second best model, which I guess the second best large and well-known model would be something like OpenAI's Jukebox, which started with lots of singing stuff. And it was okay, but there's a huge leap from Jukebox to Music LM. And so this is a model that's, I think it's getting close. I think it's getting close for electronic genres. It's getting very, very close to the sounds that humans could produce. And for acoustic genres, I think it'll be a little bit more time in this upwards curve where we're going to go there. But I do see this happening, and it's taking up pace, I think.
So let's talk about that. And for those of you guys that are not familiar, the Music LM was Google's project that they put out there.
Yes.
And I'll link it below so you guys can go check it out in the description box here. Now let's talk about why there's a bit of a bottleneck in the music AI space in terms of these models being able to generate high quality, high sample rate, believable human level music. Can you talk to us a little bit about what's maybe potentially the bottleneck there? What's preventing these models from getting very, very good very, very quickly? Maybe we can talk about the sort of quantity of the music being fed to it versus the quality of the music being fed to it. What do you know in terms of why we're not quite on par with where language models are, text language models are?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that's also a very key point to understand when kind of evaluating the quality of these music models, because lots of people maybe hear something like Music LM and they're like, well, this is not on par with my music. This can't take my job. And so like, not sure if it will take your job, but I think this quick conclusion isn't just right, because things are moving fast, and we, like, if I had asked you if something like ChatGPT would be possible at the end of 2022, if I asked you that in 2022 summer or something, you would never have thought that was possible. And I also wouldn't have in some sense. So it's like really it's really a fast, rapidly moving technology. And so there are some specific issues with music data. And of course, you can go really deep into this. I'm just trying to lay out like the main issue. And I think there are two main issues. The first one is it's much easier and much harder to get large data sets. And these models, they have large data sets. So the language models like GPT-3, the entirety of Wikipedia was scraped, but this was actually less than 1% of the training data set of GPT-3. So it's like, that's just, so the entirety of Wikipedia is less than 1% of GPT-3's training data. So this kind of gives you an idea of how much data you need and want to collect for these models. And until some extent, and I'm not sure if we're there yet, just scaling up the data set size and scaling up these models makes them much more competent and makes them better at solving the task. So music is kind of behind because it's harder to collect music data sets. First of all, because music is very, I guess, memory intensive. So a music track, especially if it's high quality, it has a few MB storage, whereas a sentence or even a paragraph or a book is like much less sometimes. So it's really, and it's also very hard to come by because like scraping music from the internet is usually made really hard for you for good reason, because usually creators don't just want their music scraped for free and then used for generative audio applications. And so there's more difficulties scraping lots of music data from the internet, especially because also of copyright issues. So it's really hard to get these large data sets. That's like my main point. And the data sets are getting larger, but it's much easier to kind of just say, okay, let me just scrape the entire internet and get all the texts on the internet than it is to kind of let me get all the music in the world. That's much easier and much harder to do. And that's the one thing. So like large data sets are really hard to get in the music domain. So it's taking longer until we can get these really huge models trained on billions and billions of songs, I guess you could say. And the second thing is also that music data itself is, we call it high dimensional. It just means complex to some extent. I'm sure that, I guess your audience will know that if you have high quality music, you probably have like a sample rate of maybe 44K or something along these lines, maybe even more. But what this actually means, if you know, of course, what a sample rate is, this means that 1 second of audio is measured at 44,100 different points in time. So you have 44K measurements per second of audio. And if you want to encode this in a mathematical representation that the computer can read, you need 44,000 numbers, so data points, for 1 second of audio. And that is incredible, just from a storage perspective. So just storing one music track digitally is just very, very resource intensive. And it's even worse when you want to generate the music, because these generative models, they're actually another beast, I guess, because you generate one element after the other. If ChatGPT writes a text, it kind of generates the first word and then calculates the probability for the next word. And then it just generates word by word the entire text, always the next word. And this is kind of easy to do with words comparatively, because just imagine you want 1 second of audio at full 44K sample rate quality. You need to generate 44,100 audio frames. This is like creating a full-blown book with ChatGPT. So 1 second of audio is kind of like creating a book with ChatGPT. And this is really a huge issue with music. So you either need to go down with the quality, and even then, like, you can halve the quality to 22K or something. It's not production quality, but it sounds kind of okay. But that's just half. So it's like creating half a book. Well, so it still doesn't solve the issue. So yeah, this is a dimensionality issue. Music data is hard to get. It's also hard to store and process because it's so resource intensive. And generating audio is like generating like libraries with a text model. So
That
That's
makes
an
a lot of
issue.
sense, and thank you. That really clarified to me what's going on with these models and why music has a little bit longer to go before it can catch up essentially with these language models, these text ones. Do you know, because recently in the news, what happened was a lot of the major labels in the United States sent letters to Spotify and Apple Music saying, hey,
Mhm.
stop letting AI models train off of our artists' music. Do you know if, you know, somebody created an AI model, they have a startup company and they have an AI model. Is it possible, even though they might not be legally allowed to be doing it, is it technically possible for them to literally tell their AI model, go listen to everything on Spotify and learn from it right now? Is that actually something that's possible?
Not everything, but just let's look at Spotify because at least I know a little bit about how this works at Spotify. You can't just listen to every song on Spotify. So it may be that if you're like really a hacker and you know how to like break their defense mechanisms, then maybe, but that's like really criminal. So I guess most research institutions or companies wouldn't risk that. So it's like, but it's true that on Spotify, when you listen to a song without having an account, for example, you get these 30-second demos. So you get these 30-second snippets of the song. And each of these audio snippets actually has a URL. So it has a link where you can access this 30-second piece of audio. So it is possible when you find these links, and it's not so easy to get the links, but it's also not impossible. So it's possible. And this is done in studies also sometimes or in private projects. And I always wonder like how carefully that was selected because I'm not sure if this is legal, but it's possible to do this. You can kind of search for these links and then you have access to these 30-second snippets. And usually in music, especially music analysis tools, it's common that you use 30 seconds of music or less just because of this dimensionality issue again. Try processing Bohemian Rhapsody in full length. That's like, no, not happening. You take 30 seconds or multiple 30-second pieces or something, or 10 seconds. So, yeah, it is actually, I guess it's possible to get a lot of music data that's copyright protected from these platforms like Spotify. I'm not sure what you can actually do against it because I'm not sure how this works with Spotify releasing these 30-second previews. But if there's a 30-second preview for your song, there's a URL that you can access to find this 30-second preview, then it's scrapable. So yeah, this is possible. And
Okay.
it's happening.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly one of the concerns that recently came up with the Pond 5 scenario situation where they at least told all their members, hey, we're letting AI models train on your music and we're going to start paying you for that. But it certainly split the community down the middle. Some were, pleasantly
Mhm.
surprised, like, oh, okay, I even forgot I had music over there. Thanks for the extra $100. And others are like, what are those AI models going to do though once they train and get inspired, quote unquote, and learn from my music? So there's certainly those, legal implications. And I think at least a company like Pond 5, who is legally arguing that they have the right to do that because their agreements specifically say that they can go out and find new sources of income for producers that have signed agreements, they're probably going to be legally safe. But every Spotify artist or everybody that put music online, they haven't signed necessarily that agreement to say like, yeah, you can use my music to train your AI models, or anybody can come in and use this. So I do see a big legal tangled spider web sort of getting wrapped up in all
Yeah.
this kind of stuff, and it's really going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And speaking of the legal implications of AI music, let's just jump into this one because I've recently released a video on my YouTube channel about, I call it a potential legal fatal flaw of AI models. And this is something that you in your Medium articles pointed out to me. And those of you guys that are watching this, you really need to follow Max's Medium articles, and his link will be in the description box below. He's got amazing articles that really, you don't have to be, a tech person or an expert on coding or anything to really understand it. And that's what's really great about Max. So definitely go check out his stuff. But one of the things that you put out in this article was basically the fact that there was about, I don't know if it was with the Music LM model, I think it was, but there was essentially about a 1 in 500 chance that the music that it spit out would potentially step on the toes of some copyrighted music that it was fed. So essentially 1 out of 500, for some people that are hearing, they're like, well, that's a really small chance of a, lawsuit. Well, if you're spitting out thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of tracks in a day, which an AI model could potentially do, 1 in 500 is a lot of, I called it a business ending lawsuit getting thrown at you multiple times a day. So can you talk about that legal risk? What can be done to maybe sort of fix that for AI models? Can it be fixed? Do you see that as a potential big fatal blow to these AI models?
Yeah. So there's one thing I think that's really important is this. I don't know what the English term for this is, but it's like the typing monkey thought experiment, and it's about really when you can like throw an infinite number of monkeys into an infinitely large room, for example, and you kind of give them a keyboard and let them write text, just randomly pressing buttons, and let them do this for an infinitely long time. Then every single text that has ever been written by a human will also be reproduced by these infinitely typing monkeys. So it's kind of the idea of when you just randomly, like fully randomly generate something, it's always possible that something that has already been created is spit out. And that's also something that exists in the copyright realm, right? So in Germany, there's a term called it's Doppelschöpfung. That means like double creation. That would be the word by word frame. So when you kind of create something that's copyright protected, a melody or a chord sequence that has already been written by another person, but you can actually prove that you weren't even aware this song existed. So then it's not really a copyright infringement because you weren't inspired by the song and copied it, but you just came up with it, just like the randomly typing monkeys. Sometimes you just have ideas that other people have had before. That happens. So because we are humans after all, right? And the same goes for machines. So there's always the possibility for any model to create something that is very similar to something that exists. Now, the issue with these models is with these AI models that are trained on, let's say, copyright protected music, they actually are aware of these copyright protected music. So it's impossible to kind of prove that they weren't influenced by these examples, that they were unaware that they existed because they're literally in the training material. So whenever an AI actually creates something that either steals a melody that's copyright protected or a full song that's copyright protected, again, not sure how this is handled in different countries, but like whenever stuff like this happens, it's impossible in my estimation. Of course, I'm not a legal expert, but just like ethically thinking and logically, it's impossible to kind of prove that this was not a copyright infringement because it's literally in the material the model was trained on. So this does happen. And the chances currently are different between models. But again, in MusicLM, I'm not sure how the numbers actually were, but they kind of reported a really small number of exact copies. And then I think 1% chance to create an approximate match. So they didn't actually go deeper into what an approximate match is, but is it just kind of similar? Or is it like literally the same chord sequence and melody, but the voice sounds kind of deeper or something? Is that an approximate match? So that's hard to tell. And this is a huge issue. And I also think this is the main reason why Google, for example, doesn't publish MusicLM, because they're really scared of their model producing these copyright infringements and kind of just collecting lawsuit after lawsuit. And this is a huge issue. So is this getting better? I don't know. So it's also, of course, there's no empirical research on whether it is getting better because it's just a very new issue. So I'm not aware of any like body of research to back this up, but just logically speaking, when you have more training data, so if you double the amount of training data, a really naive approach would be to say, okay, so then the chance to reproduce this specific piece of music kind of halves because you have double the data. So it's like it's a smaller portion of the training data set. And also in our last conversation, I kind of put it this way: if you have like the data set for a large language model or this large music model is like an ocean, and every song is like one drop of water in this ocean, and kind of the chance that a specific song will be thrown out of the model gets like smaller and smaller and smaller the larger this ocean gets. So my logic would be that as the training data sizes scale up, this will become less of an issue. But I think it's impossible to kind of just prevent the model putting copies out. So sometimes it can happen. It's a random roll. And then I guess the question would be, are there any defense mechanisms? So when this does happen, no matter how low the probability is, if you produce 10 million tracks a day and the chance is 0.0001%, not doing the math right now, but that still means kind of 1 or 10 tracks per day. So it's a matter of scale. So you need kind of defense mechanisms that look at the output of the model and get some kind of quick and efficient way of checking whether this is a copyright infringement. And I think this will be the next step to work on for generative models in image, in music, and other fields. But it's of course not there yet, no. And that's why they're not releasing their models, because it's dangerous to release them.
A great summary of the situation. And the other risk was not only is it potentially stepping on its own toes with all the data that it was fed, but just like with your monkey typewriter example, what are the chances that it accidentally just steps on the toes of just any piece of music anywhere online that's on Spotify or on YouTube or in a production music library, right? So, you know, this new need or this new international music database might need to be sprung up where it's like, okay, all AI models need to basically first cross-reference with every piece of recorded, copyrighted piece of music, right? To me, that's a very tall order. I don't know how possible that is. I think that requires everybody that ever releases copyrighted music to opt into it and also register their tracks with some sort of a database and probably upload it or make it at least searchable. So you're talking about a large, massive undertaking to kind of create that. And that might be possible. I don't know. But I do see that as one of these issues, like you said, it could be unsolvable, right? Or it could be basically just such a legal risk that it really does limit what AI companies can basically generate for their users or allow them to do. Because one play I don't see working out is these AI models and companies saying, go ahead and create music and have at it. But we're indemnified. Don't come to us if you get sued. If you create something that's copyright infringed upon somebody else, that's on you. We're innocent. I don't think, I mean, maybe consumers or just individuals who are having fun with it might do it, but I can't see any commercial use of that being used because it's just not going to be safe, right, for TV and film clients or for major labels or anybody like that. Anybody who's really trying to make a business out of using their model is just not going to take those chances. So this is one of these big kind of puzzles we got to figure out, if it can be figured out, how it can be sort of dealt with. So that was really interesting for you to say that. I wanted to ask you too, as we kind of wrap up this conversation, we have a lot we can talk about, Max, and I hope I can get you to come back on this podcast. In fact, all of you guys that are listening to this and watching this on YouTube, if you got a further question about anything that has to do with AI and technology and music, post it below as a comment, because I will do my best to get Max back on here, and maybe we can just sort of have some follow-up conversations, because each one of these questions, I think we could have gone into a full podcast in and of itself. But let's go ahead and wrap up this first one, and I basically just want to kind of ask you, this big philosophical question. It's a big struggle that we're all kind of dealing with, which is, there are people that are saying AI is going to be an augmentation of our creativity. It's going to help music creators. It's going to help music producers. It's going to help, like we said before in this conversation, non-musical people be creative. So it's here to make things better. And then there's the other side, which is the fear of AI is going to replace everything. And we're not even going to be listening to artists in the near future. We're going to be listening to everything AI generated, custom-made playlists on the spot, because it knows exactly what I want to hear at any point of the day. And all the voices are going to be AI generated. We're going to be in the matrix, essentially. We're going to be plugged into these digital drugs, and we'll have no more human connection, no more human art, no more human, creativity essentially left. Those are kind of the big two, philosophical views of where this technology is going to take us. I obviously side more on it being a positive thing for us, of course, it being challenging. But where are you with this, Max? Like, are you optimistic about it? What are some of your maybe bigger concerns you might have? Where are you in terms of where this technology is going to lead us in the near future?
Yeah, I would say I'm actually in the short or midterm. I wouldn't say I'm either optimistic or pessimistic about this, because you might think that as a data scientist, I'm just always technology positive and everything is just going to turn out great. But I think we're at a point where the developments are getting so fast and so disruptive that it's hard to kind of predict what's going to happen next. And in terms of music, I think we as musicians, or as even like music listeners, so every person who loves music, kind of makes music, listens to music, we have one weapon at our hands, I guess, and it's that music is a deeply social and aesthetic thing. So there's no objective value in music. So there's no objective value in music that can be determined by an optimization problem or something. So when music gets to the point where they produce music of the quality that is of the same quality as humans from a technical perspective and from a sound quality perspective, there's no getting better. So what are you going to do? Create music that's objectively better than the best that humans can do? That's really hard to do because humans are the one judging what good music is. So I feel like this social aspect of music, it's impossible to kind of cut that off from the music making process and from the music listening process. So also in musicology, it's well known that when you listen to music, it's a deeply social thing. So not just going to parties or something and listening with people to music, but just listening to music is a social act. So it's something you rate on social dimensions and you experience in a social dimension. So I think in the long run, as AI seems to be getting more and more competent and taking up more aspects of our life, and this is a scenario that's very realistic, that we're going to get, like our economy, especially in our everyday lives, they're going to get more and more controlled, hopefully positively. So like supported, you could say, by machines in the best case. And I think as this happens, humans will have more time also and more resources to pursue the things they're interested in that are more in the social realm. So I think especially for the field of arts, in the long term, it's a very, very positive outlook, because I think the more technology we have, the more we're kind of supported and controlled and surrounded by AI, the more we appreciate human conversations and social acts like making music, producing music, listening to music, discussing music, singing, and like all these sorts of things. I think in the long run, it's safe that music itself and also creating music is not getting less important in the long run. So I don't think this will happen. But in the short run, I think there are specific kind of jobs or gigs that are like at risk. I think especially the whole stock music market. This is one thing. So like it's same with stock photos, with these image models. So if the more the music is separated from this social appreciation aspect, the more you are at risk of being replaced by these AI models, because at some point the music will, in my estimation, have kind of the same objective quality to the extent to which you can determine that, and it'll be cheaper. And maybe it won't be copyright protected, so it'll be even cheaper. So, and especially for music applications where like music is just a side thing, so a real side thing, not like in a movie or in a video game or something, but like just something you just want to keep people busy with. I think this is actually at risk of becoming less important. There will still be people doing this, but I think it's going to get less. Same goes for producers. So there are already music tools that help us kind of get an objectively good production quality, so mastering AIs and stuff. And I think also more power to the people when I have a speech interface or a text interface and I can just say, well, I don't like this mix, make it sound a little bit more punchy and bright, for example. And then under the hood, there's an EQ, there's a compressor, there's like mixing stuff going on, but you have the control as a non-professional person just making the music. So I think producers are also a little bit at risk of getting less relevant in the numbers that they're currently existing. So this will still remain a job, but I think in the short run, these are jobs that I see that are maybe a little bit in danger. But I think especially in the long run, it won't happen that AI will take music from humans, because music is defined and judged by humans, between humans. So I have a very positive outlook into the future in terms of that there will be even a larger appreciation for music than there currently is, and of this social aspect of making music. And I think there will be lots of ways to make a living off of music, and even more importantly, to kind of live a rich and fulfilled life making music. And I think this is something that AI is unlikely to take away from us.
I couldn't agree more. And, you know, the second episode of my podcast, I basically made this whole entire presentation as to where we came from the history of recorded music, which is not that long ago, to today. You look at the span of human history and we're literally at the very, very, very end of it. It's a small, small little speck of time. We've seen all this development, but I definitely agree with you that the casualty of this in the beginning is going to be, I called it functional or transactional music, exactly how you just described. It's not really providing much of a human engagement. it's background music. It's something that just sort of fills the gap. It kind of sets a little bit of a mood. It's not something that really needs to convey a whole bunch of human emotion. And I think, that's going to certainly push out a good number of producers probably from that stock licensing site. Whether or not it really pushes out the TV and film sync licensing world, that's what kind of remains to be seen. I do see it obviously creeping into our business quite a bit. But I think the one thing that it's going to be great for is it's going to force us to become more human. I think actually a lot of producers have become almost AI like themselves in that they're just kind of stacking loops, right? Making construction kits, putting things together, not adding a lot of their own creative, original human flair to the music. And if that's your production style right now, if that's how you're making your music, you definitely need to be looking over your shoulder, because a computer will be able to do that much faster, much better, much more, much cheaper than you'll be able to do that. So I think it's kind of putting a fire under all of our butts right now as music creators to realize what's special about me. What am I doing to really add that human connection to it? And I think that's where you're right. It's gonna make us all, at least those that want to continue being relevant in this space, make us better composers and producers in the long run. Well, Max, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate your time. I will definitely be begging you to come back on this podcast, hopefully multiple times in the future. And if you guys, again, had any further comments, questions, anything for Max, and you want to basically ask him for a future interview, post those below as a comment, and definitely follow Max on Medium. His articles are very well written, well researched, and he's been one of the first voices I've really come to in this space to help me understand and make sense as to what's going on in this world. If you guys are wondering, where is Jesse getting his stuff? Max is one of the primary places where I go to try to understand this world. So you guys can get direct access to him as well through that Medium link in the description box. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and listening, and we'll see you here on the next episode of Music 2.0.